Good evening. Welcome to another edition of this episode of the Couchcasters podcast. Jeff's away this weekend on vacation, on a cruise, out and on island hopping, we call it. But so the boys got to continue. Got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Talk about the madness going on, about March Madness and everything. Some big upsets, and see who remains. But dive in, grab your popcorn, grab your beverage, and let's get down to it. Well, hello there, everybody. As the intro just showed, I also just remembered that I forgot to give everybody their introductions. As always, as I said, Jeff's not here, but I'm joined by the Murph, the Fonz, and the Crow. I am Parker, aka Maverick, part-time host. Guys, we got a lot of deep diving to go into this March Madness. Where should we start? Should we talk about FDU doing their miraculous run? We can talk about Florida Atlantic or Princeton. How about that? So take it away, guys.
I mean, FDU is probably the craziest upset I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was huge.
Just off the cuff. I mean, I saw the comparison of what like the football upset, thing would be, and it was Presbyterian College versus Michigan. So obviously Purdue, don't know what you're doing. Had a bunch of 6'6" guys on the court and got owned by a 5'8" guard and a 5'9" guard. But yeah, props to FDU.
Yeah, well, and it's even more impressive is FDU made the tournament on a technicality. It's one thing to have like blown through your conference tournament, but they lost their conference championship game, albeit by like 1 or 2 points. But the thing is that I felt like that upset was bigger than the UMBC over Virginia upset. Like Fairleigh Dickinson, nobody thought there was a chance they were going to beat 7-4 Zach Edey, and the smallest team in college basketball comes in and just it seemed like they wanted it more to me. Like they were just diving after balls. They were always getting the rebounds over this team that was so much bigger than them. It really all comes down to the fact that Purdue's guards, everybody around Zach Edey played like crap, and that's why they lost.
Yeah. They figured out a way to win in that one, and it's just apparently they figured it out in the second half too. Is let's put and they were the smallest team in the tournament. They didn't have anybody. They actually, let me say this: their tallest guy on the court was 6'5". They have a 6'7" guy on their roster. Talking about FDU, and he doesn't play. So the tallest guy they had out there was 6'4", 6'5", and then you have Zach Edey, as we talked about. He's 7'4". He's got 10 inches, almost a foot on him. So what they had to do was just triple team him and then force the game into Purdue's guards, and we all know how that turned out. They didn't show up. So,
I mean, I was shocked. Me and Haley were watching it in here, and we're just like, so invested in this first round 116 matchup. And I don't know if y'all knew this, but that was only the second time ever that a 16 seed has led a 1 seed at halftime. And so I kind of had this, thought in my mind, like, hey, they've got a lead at halftime. Maybe it'll be a good game in the second half. But I think everybody had that feeling Purdue was going to pull away with it at some point. And FDU just wasn't going to let it happen. They were pressing them up and down the court. I think really where Fairleigh Dickinson was able to really get at Purdue was just their speed. Purdue's not a necessarily fast team, and with Zach Edey being your best player, he doesn't get up the court very quickly either. But they really, I know he had 23 points, but they just neutralized him. I mean, they had somebody in his lap the entire game. Like, they were just butting up to him and weren't going to let him get the ball as much as he normally has. So impressive effort. I don't know if we'll see another upset like that for a while. So
seems like the stars aligned for these Cinderella stories this year. And then the other one being Furman. I don't know where that came from. That was that's a gritty basketball team right there. Unfortunately, they're out now, but they made a run, that's for sure. And then
right there too, Arkansas upsetting Kansas.
Yes.
Awesome.
I will say a lot of that. I do, and this is my personal thoughts. Y'all might disagree. Bill Self not being there on the sideline, helping coach that team. Now I know it is about the athletes and everything, and about the skills. But I do think he means that much to that program, and he has that much of an impact.
Well, Parker, I actually disagree with you because, while I understand losing your coach is a big impact, I think Arkansas is finally starting to look like the team that everybody thought they were going to look like early in the year. They've always had the talent. They just played down the competition all year this year. And it really showed in that game because they looked like player to player, like just as good, if not better than Kansas for a lot of that game. I mean, especially in the second half the way they played. I think Arkansas is a really talented team that had the best chance of getting that upset in the 8-9-1 matchup. And I was just impressed by their effort overall. But, I actually think even bigger than that game, I thought Duke was a Final Four team this year. And Tennessee just absolutely
around.
Yeah.
And Parker and I were at the brewery this weekend, and I watched a little bit of it there. And now supposedly, it was a really physical game, and they were not calling the fouls, probably to the amount of how physical the game was. But Tennessee, that's what they do. They get after you defensively, and if they find a referee matchup or a group of refs that are willing to be a little bit more lax on the calls, they're at a major advantage.
They are. Duke didn't want to engage either. Early on, it was just a bloodbath. Duke looked outclassed. Tennessee was just overly physical. They couldn't handle it, and they never adjusted. And they were just trying to buy calls the rest of the game. So it sucks because Tennessee got pretty hot shooting too, and they look good right now. But I mean, man.
I still think that injury is going to come back and haunt them. The Ziegler, is that right? Yeah, same.
Ziegler.
Yeah. I think that's still going to come back and haunt them. That kind of leadership, it's hard to replicate or replace that. So we'll see how it happens. But I mean, guys, we'll look at it. Auburn made a run there for a little bit. They, the first game, I think that's probably the best I've seen them shoot all year. Give that one for the Tigers on that. And then they go and play Houston. And then if y'all want to talk about the first half, it's probably one of the best first halves I've seen Auburn play all year. And then the second half happened, and that's one of the worst second halves all season.
The first half was like, Auburn might actually do it.
10-point lead, 15. Was it 10-point lead at half? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a 10-point lead.
They only scored 4 baskets in the second half. I mean, that is legitimately hard to do. In Auburn, to give them credit, this was not their most talented team. But they always kind of wound up winning the games when they were supposed to win them. I mean, they would go on streaks where they were really bad, but then they would always beat the Tennessee to get them locked into the tournament. And then, that first game against Iowa was fine. It's just Houston in the second half really turned into the Houston that we've been expecting. And that Houston team's talented, and Auburn just left too much on the floor out there in the second half. And they couldn't hit a free throw to save their lives. And at the end of the day, I mean, even Haley, my wife, brought it up yesterday. It's like, I feel like the teams that, like the Fairleigh Dickinson, they were hitting their free throws. They were doing those things to kind of stay close with FAU. That's what it takes in the tournament. You can't turn the ball over a lot and miss your free throws, and Auburn did basically both of those and just didn't make any shots in the second half.
Agreed. Then you see a couple games like Michigan State's making some noise. They're getting kind of hot down there in the lower bracket. But if you look at that, Arizona, they're gone. Purdue, they're gone.
Well,
Marquette, they're gone.
And Parker, I kind of want to tie this directly to Alabama's side of the bracket because
Go ahead.
with Princeton beating Arizona, that knocks the 2 seed out, right?
Mm-hmm.
The 3 seed lost. That was Baylor. They lost to Creighton.
They did.
And then the 4 seed lost, obviously in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And so now our pathway is 5 seed San Diego State, who I'd like to get into that game shortly. But it's 5 seed San Diego State, and then it's the winner of the Princeton-Creighton matchup. And the highest seed we would face in a Final Four game would be a 3 seed, potentially. So Alabama is in – I mean, the bracket is unfolded perfectly for us. That doesn't mean that we're going to win it all. That doesn't mean we're going to beat San Diego State. But it just looks like the bracket has formed perfectly for Alabama to really go through this thing. And I'm excited for Friday. I'm nervous, too, because Alabama has been here 9 times and only made it out once. So I hope that we're not taking them for granted because they are a solid defensive team. I was listening to the radio today, and they were talking about, their just schedule in general. They went 5-5 against Quad 1 teams this year and 2-5 against the top half of those Quad 1 games. So they haven't played a very difficult schedule. They play a very interesting brand that really is kind of the contradictory to Alabama. I'm just hoping that we can hit our shots and then play defense in response. It might be a rock fight for a little bit, but Maryland tried the same approach, and Alabama just dominated that second half. So,
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'll say this: I'll give it to somebody I thought that might have lost this past weekend was Gonzaga. Man, they played really well. Drew Timme, that I'm about ready for this guy to graduate, guys. This guy felt like he's been in college for like 8 years. All right, the guy's mustache is as old as I am, but. We talk about this. He absolutely dominates the boards, and I think if the stars continue to align, that we could see them, as a rematch. Not in the Final Four, obviously, but it'd be in the championship game if Alabama were to make it that far. But as I've stated, as everybody's stated numerous times, got to take it one game at a time. And San Diego State, as Cameron said, they're not anybody who you just overlook, all right? They're scrappy, and they'll play you to the end of the game. So, we'll see what happens.
It's just I wish we could go back to when we played Georgia. That was like the one time that out of the gate we were just amazing. Even with Maryland, it's so frustrating to watch them start. And we had to claw our way out of a deficit, and then we become awesome. But it's just been so rare that we actually just start out of the gate.
Well, I mean, Maryland's a lot Maryland's a lot better than Georgia in basketball. Unfortunately, I would say.
Well, in Maryland, they stuck to an approach early on in that game. But I think at the end of the day, our talent and offensive ability just wound up exhausting them. They couldn't fulfill the game plan that they'd come in there with just because they weren't as talented. Whereas we might come up against a Tennessee eventually in this tournament that has a little bit more talent, they might be able to stop us again. But, I like I said, I think we're in good business. Hopefully it all works out. I don't know if y'all want to talk about the whole the Nick Saban comment yesterday and what y'all think about that?
Well, I figured it was going to come up. I just wanted somebody to mention it. So yes, if you haven't heard about it yet, Cameron, you probably a little bit know more in detail, or y'all might know about what was stated or said. So, anybody want to take that one for a ride?
Oh man, I mean, it was the perfect recipe for a media shitstorm. That's for sure.
Just when you thought the Miller story was going to die out.
I mean, I will say this:
Never gonna-
I don't know what his intent was behind it. I don't know necessarily. I mean, obviously, he was referring to the Tony Mitchell situation. I don't know the context of his comment. You know, if he was talking to his team, if it was a slight at Nate, I imagine we'll find out next week when he talks to the media. But
Thursday.
Yeah.
He's talking Thursday.
he is.
So I was listening to the Next Round podcast. I'm a big fan of them. They used to be the Josh Roundtable. It's Jim Dunaway, Ryan Brown, and Taylor. Anyway, I was listening to them today.
Tyrod Taylor? Is it Tyrod Taylor?
No.
No.
No, this is an Alabama-based Birmingham.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But anyway, I was listening to them, and they have been covering Alabama Auburn sports forever, and they believe Nick Saban had no intent. It sounds like the perfect use of words to make it seem like there would be, but I'll be honest with you. I think Nick Saban just didn't realize the words he was using in that moment. And I know a lot of people are like, well, he's so calculated in everything he says. There's no way he would, blah, blah, blah. But I would guess that one of the first people after Nate Oates and all this situation happened when Brandon Miller got brought into it, or even back in February whenever it happened, I would venture to guess that one of the first people Nate Oates went and talked to was Nick Saban.
Oh, yes.
And
Absolutely.
And Nick Saban probably mentored him through a lot of that process. And I was listening to them talk today, and they pointed out Nick was at the Kentucky game right after the original incident happened. He was at the Arkansas game right after everything, kind of went down. Is he was there to support Nate. And I think he realized everything and the magnitude of everything. Now, you're going to have your media talking heads. They're going to try to blow it up into Nate Oates versus Nick Saban. But I guarantee you tomorrow that Nick Saban comes out and says something. Supposedly, they said the reporters, right after the comment was made, the University of Alabama staff actually came to them and said, hey, he did not mean to say that in direction of the basketball program, all this kind of stuff. So I really don't think he meant it that way. I think it was just he was trying to phrase the situation, and that's what came out. But I would venture to guess that Nick Saban has probably been mentoring Nate Oates more than anything in this time. So unfortunately, you got your Clay Travises and those people that are going to make it into a story that is way
Name drop.
on what it is. But while
You heard that, Clay Travis. If you ever wander upon this podcast, you have been called out directly by the Crow. So
I mean, I don't mind Clay Travis, but I will say he has been over and beyond it, just crazy about this whole Brandon
this
Miller
whole thing for the past 3 months has been absolutely
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So, and to speak on that, did any of y'all get to read the Tuscaloosa Patch article with the full
Yes.
breakdown of everything that happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was
And
really telling about a lot of the situation, maybe some of the misguided, approach that some of the media has taken. I'm not saying that, it's a perfect representation of everything that happened. I mean, it's reporting at the end of the day, he wasn't there, but it seemed like he really had his cards in order and did a great job putting that story together. And it seems based on that Brandon Miller had barely any involvement in this process at all.
100%.
And the way the media has reported it and just kind of took some words and vomited it out onto paper. And
Did y'all even see that the New York Times is going to get potentially sued for the?
They're not going to lose. They're not going to lose that lawsuit. So the reality is,
They'll cut a check and
Yeah.
Kai Spears, the guy who they are saying was in the car, and I'm not saying he was or wasn't by any means, but he's a public figure in the eyes of libel cases. and that means that it is harder for you to prove your lack of involvement or whatever the case is. And their lawyers are bigger than or just as big as any of the lawyers that they would face. I doubt that actually winds up going to litigation. But I do. My understanding is I was listening to the guy who wrote that Tuscaloosa Patch article yesterday on the Next Round podcast. He was on there, and supposedly it seemed like Brandon Miller was literally like the DD that night.
Yeah,
he'd actually taken several other people home, and it's one of those things. Like his role in this was almost nothing. If yes, you can tie it back to the fact that he never shows up in that car is, someone still alive. Yeah, probably so. But I don't think that means that he's complicit in this murder. And I would actually say that there's a lot more information coming out. Mm-hmm. I heard that the gentleman who was the boyfriend of the young lady who died hasn't shown up at any of the court appearances. They've been trying to subpoena him. They can't find him, so there's some interesting things there. And I know the defense attorneys for Darius Miles, and what was the other guy's name? The guy who actually did the shooting? Davis?
Michael Davis. Yeah.
Davis. They're basically saying, hey, this could be self-defense. And based on the reporting, it seems possible that they were not the first ones that fired shots. And if they can, actually prove that as self-defense, that changes just about everything.
Everything. The reporters out there, and this is kind of going back to the blown out of proportion, the media statement about Saban making that statement. Tony Mitchell was going 141 miles an hour, running, evading police, and had over, I don't know, however many grams. It was
220 grams.
220 grams.
$7,000 in cash.
That's just plain. I'm sorry, plain dumbassery. All right, that's just, you're evading police, going 140 miles an hour. I know it's still still probably a little early to say that, but that's about how fast Henry Ruggs was going. But when he was drunk driving and ran into the back of somebody and killed her and her dog, so the two situations are not comparable in any manner.
Yeah, well, I was listening to somebody talk about this today, and they were like, back in the old Western days, you could run from the cops and maybe get away with it, but you're not beating radios today, and that means that you're going to get caught. And so, I think more so the reason why they ran, obviously, was because of what was inside the car. You have a gun and then, a lot of, illegal drugs. But, that's bad. And, I think Nick Saban's probably going to be very tough on this one, specifically because of the whole situation that's currently revolving around that.
I agree. I mean, this guy's a freshman coming in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been there 2 months. So
these kids nowadays, and it's not, I can't blame it all on the kids because they're growing up in a society where social media, is just out there and you can't get away from it. And, foolish decisions. One, he's, 18, 19 years old. He is a kid, but was still a dumb decision. There's been a lot of dumb decisions made recently on a lot of things. But I agree with Cameron's statement. I think it's going to be real tough, and hopefully the kid can get on the right track and, avoid this from ever happening again. Hopefully that happens, but we shall see. So,
do you think he'll actually play them?
I mean, I think Saban's he's open to the media about it. He gives second chances, but if there's legal ramifications with this, which there's going to be for sure for the speeding, he's probably gone, I would guess, in this current state.
I would say so.
You can basically just pack your bags and go wherever.
I mean, if they label it for like intent to sell or anything like that, I mean, we're talking about and if it's what was he in Florida when this happened?
Yeah, I was in Florida.
Yeah.
So I don't know their laws as far as what the ramifications of what intent to sell a product like that down there. So
Well,
Maybe-
he had a
maybe-
half pound of weed and $7,000, so
it's
I don't
not
think he's
good.
going to be fooling anyone.
Maybe some of you Floridians out there can intrigue us and enlighten us on what that would carry, but I don't know. So, what? Oh, wait, no, Hunter can do it because he's in Tallahassee. Hunter, let's go ahead and take it away there, buddy.
Yeah, I may not. He may be doing business with where I work at. So
Oh, look, no, conflict of interest. Can't do that now. Conflict of interest. But, well, so we're getting down to the Sweet 16. Who are the final? Who is it? It's Alabama, and they're into it. But who are the other 15? Let's really dive into that.
Michigan State, and they play Kansas State, I think.
Yep.
There's
UConn and Arkansas.
UConn, Arkansas, which is going to be a good game.
I saw that one. Yeah.
FAU versus Tennessee. Not St. Peter's, sorry. Princeton versus Creighton and
Gonzaga, UCLA.
Gonzaga, UCLA. Houston plays Miami. Yeah.
I have UCLA going. I think I had them in my Final Four in our podcast bracket, which, yay to me! I am leading as the leader in the podcast brackets. Don't worry, guys. We are all out of it after day one anyway, so it doesn't matter. It was lasted a whole 5 hours of being perfect. So, but no, I think we might have briefly touched on it. But maybe opinions have changed since last week about, who's y'all's Elite Eight? Who's y'all's, Final Four? Who do y'all have having in the championship with the contenders that we have out there in the playing field now?
I think I had Duke. I'm almost positive. I had Duke, Kentucky in the Elite Eight, and so
Me
that
too.
side of the bracket is shot. I think I had Gonzaga maybe on the other side, though. So that one's possibly still there, but my bracket's crushed. Every one of mine is crushed. But at this point, I don't care. I'm just focused on Alabama, winning it all. That's really my only focus. And I was talking to my uncle. I told him I was texting with him, and I mentioned that I think that I've wanted this national championship more than some of the football national championships. And he said 1992 and 2009 he wanted more than he could breathe, or more than he wanted air. But he said this was right up with it, and that's the way I feel about it. It's just like it's so unprecedented for us, and gosh, it's going to hurt if we lose in the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight even. I mean, I know it's considered a good year to get to this point, but I want at least a Final Four, and then by the time I get there, I'm going to win a national championship. So. Let's hope it happens.
The recipe's too perfect
yeah,
to not at least make it
Yep.
to the championship. I mean, God, what a disappointment. We don't have to worry about Arizona. Baylor and Virginia, we probably didn't have to worry as much about anyway, but
Imagine if Princeton did beat Creighton and we beat San Diego State. It happened last year. It can happen. And Princeton plays a very, very steady play game. They don't turn the ball over. Their offense is very particular, precise. They don't make a lot of mistakes, and it's hard to beat some teams like that. But if that happens, I have to believe Alabama's talent disparity over theirs is going to be, considerable in the Elite Eight. So.
Mm-hmm.
But Creighton is one that kind of worries me a little bit because they are one of those teams that we have struggled with in the past.
We owe them from a
Yeah,
long
I
time
don't know
ago.
what it is about them that we struggle with, but I think we've lost the last 3 times we played them. So.
Yeah, I'll give one to Jeff on that one. He would say, and that what was it? Trevor Relaford shooting that shot and getting fouled on it, the no call, the game being over. Shout out to the Jeff on that one, the Qualio. loves that one. But yeah, no, I actually I see us playing. This may be in a bammer, but so be it. I think if we play our game, we play Friday, right? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So if we play our game, I think we will. We'll beat San Diego State, and then I guess we would be playing the winner of who would it be? Princeton,
Creighton, Princeton.
And I think we'll end up playing Creighton in the Elite Eight. So other than that,
You had a
anybody?
reasonable hour too.
Hmm?
Not freaking midnight when the game ends.
Yeah,
It's so exhausted.
yeah. But does anybody else have anything to say before we head over to the next topic?
I just wanted to say that looking back on it, I was really stupid to have A&M go that far on my bracket.
I don't think it was. I mean, a lot of people thought that A&M was actually going to do pretty well going into it. I disagree with it. I think it was a smart choice, but they just fell apart. They didn't show up. So I don't know.
I think they got kind of screwed, to be honest, too. They ended up playing the hottest 10 seed. I mean, Penn State was realistically probably an 8 or a 9, and A&M was probably a 5 or a 6, 7, probably somewhere in there. So, or they were a 7, I guess, but still, I mean, they got kind of screwed with who they ended up playing.
Yeah,
Penn State can really shoot. So
I thought A&M, I mean, they should have gotten the benefit of the doubt and should have gotten like the Boise State Northwestern side. They should have been where Northwestern was, Northwestern. Well, but you don't want to put conference teams in the first round. I get that. But yeah, like A&M got screwed. I had them in the Elite Eight as well. So it's not – I mean, they're a good team. They just faced a buzzsaw in a Penn State team that had really been playing much better. I mean, they had to work their way into the tournament, and when they started turning it on, they really did. So it is what it is.
Did you have Tennessee getting knocked out in the first round too?
I had them getting knocked out either in the first round or the second round.
Yeah.
I had them losing to Duke.
I
had them
definitely
losing
did
to
not
Duke.
think they were beating Duke. So
Yeah.
I had them losing to Duke, and Duke playing Kentucky and all that fun stuff. So, well, all right, changing gears here, guys. We wanted to discuss. I think we're about less than a month away from the NFL draft, and there's trade rumors going on. I know Aaron Rodgers has got some interesting topics on that. Lamar Jackson, some news came out today, and then there's been some shuffling in the draft boards. Who wants to take this one?
Well, I don't really keep up with NFL like Scott does. I'm sure he's a real Steelers fan, and so I'm not going to have much to comment on the Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson stuff. But I will say with the draft, I definitely think that they're going to take C.J. Stroud, number 1 overall, and that's going to lead Bryce Young to the Texans. I think actually that's a better scenario for Bryce Young is to be with the Texans. New coach. Hopefully, there's a new approach. They've been drafting high here lately, so maybe they've got some players. The Panthers, they gave away their best receiver to get the number 1 pick. I don't. There's no Christian McCaffrey there anymore. There's no DJ Moore there anymore. I would say that Bryce Young, the better situation for him is to be the number 2 pick, and I think that'll be okay.
Where are we seeing Will Anderson go?
I have no idea, but I imagine the top 5. I want to go back to the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young thing a little bit. I actually agree. I was going to say something along the same lines. Panthers have kind of reloaded. I think they're going kind of hard with a quick turnaround. They've been bad for a while, but I think they're going to try to win pretty quickly. I think CJ Stroud is probably better for that. Bryce Young's incredible. He's a generational college talent. And I certainly think he's going to be a franchise quarterback in the league, but they're going to have to build a team around him, I think. And the Texans can do that right now. That team is gutted. They're brutal. And the Panthers have brought in Thielen, Miles Sanders. They've done some work to their offensive line. I think they're all in on Stroud, personally. I don't have much more to add than that, but I agree with Cam. So,
Hunter, you got anything?
No, I agree. I did hear rumblings about the Panthers, but it seems it's going to be a Texan, which I feel like we've all kind of known all along. So,
Well, I hope Bryce is a franchise quarterback. There's some things that he has to work on at the next level, and unfortunately, it's not a place you want to work on things. Is the next level. I felt like he had a similar approach as Tua, as he was always just trying to make that play, and it got him. Many times it knocked us out of field goal range or put us in a much tougher field goal position or something like that, because he'd take a sack when he didn't have to, and it actually cost us some games at some point in some of the closer games. And he's got to realize, like, it's at a certain point, especially in the NFL, you've got to throw the ball away. You've got to get rid of it. I feel like a lot of teams are going to take the same approaches that some of the bigger SEC teams did this year. They're going to push the Texans' offensive line into him, make him have to move around in the pocket because he can't see over the O-line very well. Mm-hmm. So I just think there's some flyers out on Bryce Young. I don't think C.J. Stroud's like the most generational number one pick ever. I can tell you that for a fact. But he has a little bit more of just – he's proven it on the field, but he's also a bigger stature guy that I think is, probably not going to take those hits as much. So we'll see what happens with that. But, I was hearing today that they thought that 4 out of the top 5 picks would be or 4 out of the top 10 picks were going to be quarterbacks. And, I mean, that's not a surprise. But I just really wonder about like Will Levis and Anthony Richardson and really what they are and, the future of them. I mean, Anthony Richardson had a hell of a combine, but he never really proved anything on the field like he was a stud. And Will Levis, I don't think that a team probably failed to reach their expectations quite as much as Kentucky this past year. I mean, they were getting upset by everybody this season. I mean, they were lucky to be 7-5 going into the bowl game.
They were.
And I know it's like, well, he's playing at Kentucky, but this is a Kentucky team that won 10 games last year. And so I don't know. I would not take a flyer on either of those guys. They're trying to build a franchise quarterback up. I don't think either of those guys are the guy. I would actually take Anthony Richardson, though, still over Will Levis. I think that he has at least some upside with his athleticism, but we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. I mean, Kentucky's been turning out talent for 10 years, NFL talent, and Will Levis was, I don't want to say their weakest link, but huge disappointment. Their O-line struggled, which didn't help them, but, SEC East that is typically weak. He was a little better last year, but still weak. He largely fell flat. So I think it's crazy that someone would take such a risk on him, but there's a team out there that will, and he might surprise some people. I'll say that. I think he could start in the league, but not for long. I don't think he's going to be making $30 million a year or anything. But
well, Scott, I could be wrong on this, but I feel like when you hear those guys that you haven't heard of them in college, but then they wind up being like that top 5 pick or whatever, they just don't like Mitch Trubisky, like just hasn't panned out.
Let me clarify.
Carson Wentz.
I'll say this. I don't think he will ever live up to the bill of like a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
But I think he could step into the league and be like a serviceable starting quarterback for a team for a couple years, but he's still going to leave a lot to be desired. And once his rookie contract's up, he's just moving on. Well, I don't think he's going to be Sam Darnold.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of players that they get drafted based on their measurables. And like Jared Goff's had some good years, but he was like one of those guys, it was like he didn't do anything at Cal, that was impressive. But he got drafted with his measurables, and his whatever. But then you have your Josh Allens that wind up becoming superstars, and your Pat Mahomes that become superstars, and they weren't good in college. So I mean, they weren't. It wasn't that they weren't good. They were on bad teams. So we'll see what happens. But the best of luck to Bryce and Will Anderson and Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think is going to probably get taken in the first round as well.
Brian Branch too.
Brian Branch,
He really helped his stock at the end of the year. He raised that bar, and from what I heard, he had a pretty good combine. So
Killer combine,
yeah. So I know we're getting to that latter part of the show, guys, but I wanted to touch back on one thing. Diving still back into Alabama football, actually. Spring training going on currently. Some things looking forward to is the QB battle going on between Ty Simpson and goodness, the name goes blank. Somebody fill me in here.
Jalen
Milroe. Sorry, losing it. But yeah, and then seeing if the mentality of the defense is going to return back to the old way of being, nitty gritty and getting after the quarterback. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, usually spring practice right around this time would be the priority for Alabama fans. It's kind of refreshing that that's not the case because of our performance in basketball. But I don't really have any thoughts on it. It's hard to say Ty Simpson's going to come in and be this super stud that's way better than Jalen Milroe. We have barely seen him play. So it's the jury's out. The spring game will prove a lot. We'll probably know coming out of that who the likely candidate is for that starting quarterback job. But right now, I think we just got to watch it play out. You got a new offense coordinator. You don't know how that approach is going to, either help or hinder either of those guys, or help or enhance, the two incoming freshmen. So we'll see what happens. I would say that Ty Simpson's probably the favorite just in my mind, just because we've seen Jalen Milroe play, and while he is the most athletic player possibly on our roster, there are obvious limitations to his game, and I hope that some of that stuff was getting cleared up, in practice last season, but he wasn't handling the ball well, or he wasn't taking care of the football, and then it just he seemed like he was limited on his accuracy and range throwing the ball. So knowing Ty Simpson was this 5-star pocket passer that could also move the ball with his legs as well a little bit, just makes you think that that's where his game thrives. So we'll see what happens, but I feel like Tommy Rees's offense is going to be more modeled towards a Ty Simpson rather than a Jalen Milroe.
Agreed. I think Milroe too. I mean, the jury's still out on him. Obviously, he was not good against A&M. We all saw that. He did some very nice things with his legs in both the Arkansas and A&M game, but I mean, he knows what his weaknesses are. So they're trying to iron those kinks out. He's working hard too. I still think Ty Simpson's probably the guy, but we could see a completely different quarterback too next month.
Yeah, maybe we brought in that 5-star that just came in was Eli Holston. Now I don't see him pressing for the starting job, but that guy can rip the ball. I can tell you that right now. Got a strong arm, but I'm not worried at the quarterback position. I think we've got a lot of talent there. It's just about as I'm guessing what Cameron said, just ironing out everything, getting these, or I'm sorry, it's Fonzie that said that, ironing out all the issues that are going on right now. Now, everybody wants to harp on Milroe. Yeah, I was a big supporter of him last year, and I was a little disappointed in everything that came up at the end of it. But he also didn't have the most talented offensive line that Alabama's had in recent years to help him, rolling around, being mobile. But then the receiving core too. Now we all want to talk about that too. It was a little lackluster last year. Hopefully that's going to be changed this year, with a lot of people leaving, getting out of, graduating or transferring out. hopefully we're a little bit more organized, and as Cameron stated with Tommy Reese, we've got a different approach. I think get back, I would say, to a run first kind of scenario, and then see how it plays out.
I'm not saying it has to be run first. I just think it's going to be more run balanced.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed like Bill O'Brien just would get so out of the run game that it was like hindering our progression on offense. Like, I mean, we had Jahmyr Gibbs who didn't even run for 1,000 yards last season, and he's literally one of the most athletic players I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it like in a lot of the games where he wasn't going for over 100, he'd only have like 12 carries, and so now he was catching the ball out of the backfield a lot, and I know he put up more receiving yards than any running back in Alabama history probably. But, I think Tommy Reese he's not going to be afraid to use the tight end, use, the I formation at times and those type of things, but also still understand the pieces he has on offense, be able to adapt the offense around that. So I don't think that's going to be all the game. I think it's still going to be a spread focus, but also with a little bit of a mix of multiple packages and being able to run football. So
we shall see. We shall see. Well, does anybody have any closing thoughts before we tell everybody good night for the night?
I've always just felt that with Milroe, even if he couldn't make it as a QB, he could almost fit in another position and be just fine with how athletic he is.
Yeah, but it's also got to come down to if he wants to make that decision too.
Yeah,
Instead of, sometimes that has really hindered a lot of quarterbacks who, maybe they weren't going to pan out like that. Like, in my opinion, had Tebow,
I was about to say
Tebow all the time. Had he made that move earlier to go ahead, but going into the NFL and move that position. Now I know what he did in that first 2 seasons with Denver. I mean, he led them to a playoff win. That was great. But I think if he had made that move to another, that was one play Hail Mary and he wins the game in overtime.
And that was
played like dog shit that whole game too.
Yeah,
he didn't even play well.
So
and we were a good team that year, but
in today's time, it's just easier to transfer and go play the position you want to go play somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just not very few players are going to get sold on changing positions and like sticking around and like having to make that adaptation. Maybe like wide receiver to defensive back or vice versa. That's makes more sense possibly if it gives you an opportunity to get on the field. But going from quarterback to playing another position is not an easy pathway. No. So, I would assume if he doesn't get the job, he's probably going to be in the portal at some point.
Agreed. Well, has anybody got any extra things to say before we tell everybody?
No.
Nope. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for joining tonight. I know Jeff hopefully loved it. I know he'll be back next week when we go do another episode. Remember to like and subscribe. I know Jeff and the rest of us Couchcasters would like that, of course, But thanks for joining, and we'll see y'all next week.